Alrighty, I think we will kick things off. Can everybody just a couple of checks first? Everybody see the presentation and also hear me for starters. Just give me some thumbs up or hearts, or got some thumbs up flying across the room. That's what we love to see. Very, very good. All right, let's kick things off. Thanks everybody for turning up in person. All 100 of us. You can't see us online, but we've got a massive crew in person. So thanks everybody for turning up in person, and for everybody online. Hello and welcome to this month's Copilot Mastermind, where we're going to be taking a look at Copilot in OneNote. A little bit about just the agenda, a little bit of housekeeping for everybody in person. We do have some drinks and all that sort of stuff. Some food coming as well. And we are lucky enough to be graced with guru presence, Matt and Brett Gilbertson. So we're just we'll jump into Copilot in OneNote. Then if you do have any Q&A, I'll be monitoring when Matt and Brett are presenting. I'll be monitoring all the questions and chat and things like that. So if you have any questions, just pop them in there, and then we'll have a look at next month's session. Actually, it's going to be this month as well, a little bit later in this month. First of all, sponsors. Thanks to Digital First Australia, Grant's in the room here as well. So this type of stuff, presenting or making drinks and refreshments and everything. Not that that is of any relevance to everybody joining online, but I think the drinks and everything like that. Thank you very much to Digital First Australia for sponsoring all of these events, and the Reactor as well. And then also, if you're not connected, I'd love to connect with you online through any of those channels. So hit me up there. A couple of things before we pass over to Matt and Brett. There's a couple of things that we'll go through just from the roadmap and the latest updates of Copilot that I think will bring everybody some value if you don't already know about what is happening. So first off, in Viva, so Copilot in Viva Amplify. So if you don't know what Viva Amplify is, then go and check that out. It allows you to basically create a piece of content and then distribute that through different types of or different channels. So whether it's SharePoint, whether it is Teams, whether it is Viva Engage, whether it is via Outlook, we can then publish or create a piece of content and choose which channels we do publish that to. So Copilot is coming to the Viva Amplify editor, which is going to be really, really good for those communications people as well. So the preview is later on this year, November, and also the rollout quickly followed at the moment anyway at December. The image generation, so being able to create and generate images in Copilot Chat is coming this month as well. So creating images through natural language, which you can do online at the moment in the web, but that's coming to Copilot Chat as well. New prompt collections. So if you have visited the Copilot lab and the prompts there are going to be more collections coming for role-specific use cases. So sales, finance, and energy, interestingly enough, there's going to be some collections of prompts there based on those specific roles as well. That has been, well, it's been around for a little while, the Copilot Lab anyways, since May, but that is extending out later on, I think later on this month. Summarizing content over specific periods of time in Copilot in Teams. So now what you are going to be able to do is prompt based on a specific time period. So whether it is yesterday, last month, 6 months ago, or things like that, you're going to be able to do that inside of Copilot in Teams. That has already started to roll out and is available now. So it's time specific, which is really, really good in terms of bringing relevant content back through a specific period of time. Now, this is a big one as well. So improvements around Copilot in M365 for graph-grounded chat. So there's a lot of improvements coming here. So in Outlook, you're going to be able to reason over a user's archive mailbox as well. So that's expanding that coverage to all of the email content in that primary mailbox. And also navigating specific folders or subfolders in responses as well. So thumbs up there. So that's obviously something that is going to bring some value. So in Teams, you're going to be able to ground your conversations in team group chats and quickly find all of that relevant information when doing those prompts as well. Finishing off this is some massive improvements around reasoning over large files and the sources for prompts there. So you're going to be able to, well, the increase there is from 2,000 characters to 16,000 characters, which is a really big improvement and a big scope increase there as well. This is something that's, I think, is going to be pretty good. So being able to find or prompt, using prompts like find files in my OneDrive or find this particular file or, these groups of files in a particular marketing site or in a specific folder inside of document libraries, inside of sites, as well as your OneDrive, which I think is going to be pretty good. Everything else on the roadmap, I won't go through everything else. Even just this month, I think there's just under 20 different items on the roadmap. But if you do want to check out the roadmap, that is just a little a link there that's easier to remember than just the long Microsoft roadmap URL. Head to that URL and that will take you to the roadmap where you can keep updated with everything that is happening and being released at any given point in time. I'm going to stop there because we're going to introduce Matt and Brett Gilbertson. I'm not going to do an intro because I won't do them justice. So Matt and Brett can introduce themselves. But these guys are amazing at not just OneNote, but the whole productivity and digital skills space, doing some really good things in that space as well. So I am going to hand over to Brett, who is here with us in the room, and the humongous crowd that we do have here. And Matt is joining us online. So I will hand over to you, Brett, and take it away.
Thanks, Daniel. It's a pretty good intro. Just give us a second to get myself set up here. And I think I will spotlight. I'll turn my camera on so you can all see me now. Had my device pointing at the ceiling, so it wasn't very good.
I'll stop sharing.
And you can unspotlight yourself if you want, and while you're there, spotlight me and Matt maybe.
So you can unspotlight, exit spotlight.
Thanks, man. Cool. And I will share my screen as well. We'll get ourselves properly set up here. All right. Awesome. Good to go.
There you go.
So, and Matt, just doing a sound check. You're still there? Good. Yeah. And I noticed that you've got your. You didn't get your top hat, but you do have your sparkling OneNote.
I do have my magician's hat here. If we want it. But,
keep this on for the theme in a minute. But so Matt and I we work together. We've worked together for many years now, and obviously we're brothers. Matt lives in Queensland, and I live in Melbourne, and that's how it works. Just 2,000 kilometres, allows for the sibling relationship. But we've worked together in this space for many years, just helping people to acquire better digital skills. It's not what we set out to do, but it's what we've ended up doing, and it's a fun place to be. We call ourselves digital skills coaches, and we have a digital skills coaching program that we have in place with people. So that's who we are. Now,
while you move on to what we're talking about, but I will introduce John Mark, who's with us as well on the call from our team. So John Mark is also a digital skills coach. He's not billed in the we couldn't get him on the bill. Too many big heads on the front page, but he's here helping us online, answering questions, and he's got at his fingertips a bunch of resources that we'll share as questions get asked as well as we go through.
Awesome. So we're here to talk about Copilot in OneNote, and I had planned to do this a slightly different way, but I've sort of adapted my. I've got a form in a minute that I'll share with you just to get some input. So we're going to start off by trying to be as interactive as we can, bearing in mind that most people here are online. But I probably better minimize this so that we can see this properly in the room. Matt and I, one of the reasons Matt had the outfit on there is that we often get asked by people like Microsoft to share tips and tricks. You know, can you just go in there and do your tips and tricks? They say to us, and we often sort of recoil a little bit. It sort of seems like we're just magicians there to just show them a few tricks and we'll fix people's productivity. The reality is, when you look at a tool like OneNote, the adoption is low. We're probably talking at around about 20% of the people who use Word use OneNote. That's pretty low, isn't it? Does anybody here know when, perhaps online, actually, I might ask those online. Does anybody know when OneNote came out? Because I know a few of the room in here know the answer to this, so I'll get you to hold your comment. If anyone online, maybe just check the chat, guys, and see if anybody can guess when OneNote came out.
2007.
Pretty close.
Jeff's got 2007, 2003.
Craig's the winner.
2003. Craig, you're I don't have any prizes. I'll make one.
Well, there's a beer here for Craig. He's got to come.
Craig.
Yeah. So congratulations, Craig. 2003. So it just turned 20 years old. So it's been around for a long time. The interesting thing about that 2003, Brad Smith said in a speech. Brad Smith, by the way, is Microsoft's company president. He's the chief legal officer. He gave a speech in 2022 to the IMF Exchange, big international forum, where he said, in the year 2000, we stopped training people on how to use a computer. And that included Office, right? Excel, Word, all of those sorts of things. OneNote came out in 2003, which was after we stopped systematically teaching people. The result is we have low adoption of this tool. It's not a bad tool. It's just that we never taught people about it like we did Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And Outlook, by the way. Outlook snuck in there in 1997. So before we stopped training people. But what we want to do today, we are going to share you a few tips and tricks that we've learned. We're really in a learning mode when it comes to Copilot ourselves. So, we're engaging with customers all the time on this, but we're still sort of going, we want to learn what you're going to do with it. And hey, it's changing so quickly. It's kind of hard to nail down at times. So that's what we're going to cover today. So let's get into our question. I'll just skip the agenda here because what we're going to do. We're going to show some demos. We're going to talk about what the roadmap is as well, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. But if you've got your mobile device alongside of your presentation here, you might want to scan this QR code because I've got 3 questions for you here that I want to get your responses on. The first question is, let me scroll back here. What is a note? You could put multiple words in. This is just a word cloud response here that we're just using. This is a PowerPoint. This forms integration with PowerPoint here. So hopefully this will work, and maybe someone can tell us if I haven't set this right. I'm expecting answers to come through. Yeah,
looking good.
Good. So far, so good. Just a couple of words on each question. So the first one is, what's a note? I don't know. Seems obvious. It's kind of a hard question to answer, isn't it?
What is a note, Brett?
What is a note? I don't have the answer.
Matthew, what is a note?
We'll come back to that.
Yeah,
come back
we will.
to that. How do you take notes is the second question. So I'm thinking about physically, how do you do it? On your laptop, do you type them? Do you write them on a piece of paper? Do you use the back of a napkin? Do you, whatever, what programs do you use? If you are doing digital notes as well, whack that into the words as well, chuck it in there. Hopefully a few will be OneNote. I'm sure there'll be lots of loops and notions and obsidians, things like that as well. And why do you take notes is interesting as well. So we got lots of questions here, or lots of answers coming through. With why do you take notes? This is good. And I'm also really thinking of a particular theme here, which is around meetings. Do you take notes in meetings? If so, why? Just want to get your responses on these questions. Cool. So while they're coming in, and I'll come back to those in just a second, what I'll do is I'll just go through. The way I wanted to do this was, instead of anticipating more people in person, there are a few here, but I was going to write the answers just onto my PowerPoint presentation here, but I figured it would be better with that QR code when we come back to it in a second. And so I just wrote the questions onto the page, and what I did is I actually tried to use Copilot to create this slide deck, right? Just with a prompt, I'm sure. Have you done a session on PowerPoint yet?
It has been included, yes.
It's pretty amazing what it can do. But out of the 27 slides that it created for me based on my prompt, I think I've ended up with about 2 slides left in the deck that I kept. Doesn't mean that it's not good. It's just the interesting thing here is the way it when I asked it to create a slide that just said, what is a note? It came back with an answer for me. So it's actually come up with this here, and it's kind of telling me what a note is, but it's not what I asked for. So yeah, so I had those slides in there just sort of written like that. That was my original plan. All right, so we got heaps of responses here, which is fantastic. Lots of information themes here and what is a note. Reference or a memory, a thought, memory. It's like, that's interesting sort of similar themes there from everybody. How many responses we got on this one? 23. Any more?
Come on, there's 69 of you online.
Grab your phone out, scan that QR code. Let's get a few more. What is a note? Now, the reason I asked this question is I met with Ryan McMinn, who was the head of notes at Microsoft a few years back. Ryan left Microsoft to join Google, and he's now the head of Keep. But he's a real smart guy, and he had a depth about notes that I never anticipated, right? I thought I knew everything about notes. This guy knew way more than I did. And he showed me the wall that they had in the OneNote office. For, if you wouldn't mind just checking. Thanks. There's someone unmuted there. He had a wall, or they had a wall in the original Microsoft OneNote office, and it had notes on it. What they did when they set out to create this product is they got people to send in their notes, whatever form they took. So there were sticky notes, of course. There were notebooks and diaries and all sorts of different bits and pieces of information that were plastered all across this wall. So it kind of set the theme for what the product was created around. Didn't see any sticky notes mentioned there, or diaries or notebooks. Maybe they'll be on the next page. Yeah. Let's have a look. Does this fit your worldview of what a note is? Interesting question. All right, so how do you take notes? Lots of OneNotes there. That's good. So we've got a group of people here who's interested in OneNote. That's really cool. Notepad plus. That's it's a third-party notepad, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. For coders. That's cool. We've got Notion and Loop there. Nobody said Obsidian. Can't believe that. And Notepad. Not a big thing. I expected a few more notepads. There's a few people like, is anybody, you've seen Mary Jo Foley, the Windows PC, or the Windows lady at CNET, Microsoft? She did all of her note-taking for all of her journalism career in Notepad. You saw that they recently added, I think, automatic saving in Notepad recently.
Yes.
And spell check as well. Cool. All right. So it gives us a good idea of what you're doing. Lots of scraps of paper there. That's what I wanted to see. Notepads as well. All of those things are great mediums for note-taking. So that's good. Someone's got Remarkable in there as well. That's really cool. Interesting device. All right. And why do you take notes? So let's have a look for the themes in here. To remember things is a big one there, which is great. And for actions as well. That's a common theme that's coming out there. What else is in there? Scan documents, access and retrieve memory retention. My brain is small. There's all good stuff there. We asked this question of, I'd say, thousands and thousands of people. Why do you take notes? And especially around that theme of meetings. And in fact, Matt, we got to ask Vishnu Nath, who's the head of notes at OneNote, or head of notes at Microsoft, and owns the OneNote product. Just recently, and his team there, we said, why do you take notes? And they came back with these 3 themes as well. We tend to take notes, and this is what most people tell us. We take notes, especially in meetings, to remember. That's the number one answer that people give us. And that's what Vishnu and the team all said as well. So the people creating the product, that's cool. The second reason people take notes is for action items. To-dos, absolutely. So that's there. What's missing in this group, which is interesting, is record keeping.
Yeah, the government answer.
The government answer, we like to call it, right? But, the minutes, the records, that's usually the third thing that emerges from this question. And maybe it's just a little related to the context, yeah. But the team at Microsoft, the OneNote team, they gave us those 3 answers straight off the bat. Interestingly, when we think about note-taking in the meeting context, we often get answers, and I'll say often, actually, it's not often. We rarely get this answer, but it's an interesting one and it's a recurring theme. People say, I take notes to look good, to look important, to look smart. In some organizations, this theme is continual and it's really interesting. Why does this happen? But it's probably like 1 in 20 groups that will get somebody that will say to us, I take notes to look smart. And I often wonder if they say that about other people or about themselves, because it's an interesting one. But there is actually, this, when you dig into it, there's an interesting thread of truth in there, which is that we do take notes to signal, right? To signal our attention, to signal that we're ready and participating. So note taking is actually a two-way street. So I want to just sort of set the big picture context here before we jump into what Copilot can do for us with our note taking and OneNote. So I'll skip through these slides. And so when I'm thinking about these responses, I got to interview this guy here on the screen. Chris Prutley is in the middle there, back 2 years ago by the looks of it. And he's the guy that created, or really came up with the idea of OneNote back in 2001. People that follow Microsoft might know Stephen Sinofsky, might have heard of Stephen Sinofsky because he was the head of Office back at this time. He was also the head of Windows later on, and he kind of left after Windows 8, maybe got pushed out, we're not sure. But Chris went to Stephen, who was the head of Office, as I said, and said, you know what, I've got this stuff in my life that's not a Word document, not an Excel spreadsheet, it's not a PowerPoint, doesn't belong in any of those programs. Do you remember when Outlook used to have sticky notes in it? Yeah, I think they're still there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And tasks, yeah. And it had things like that. He's like, I don't want to go to Outlook to do this. I've just got notes, I've got things, and I need them to go somewhere. We don't have a tool in Office to do this. And they went, okay, let's make something. Now, in the story, Chris tells how Stephen is a highly organized project guy, right? He's run big divisions and big companies, vice president sort. And he really steers towards that highly organized note-taking, right? So a database kind of guy. This is the kind of thing that we see with people who use Notion and Obsidian and now Loop to take their notes. They really want to be organized. So Chris called them the filers, right? We know this analogy, the filers and the pilers. Chris falls into the pilers category, right? I just want to take the notes. I don't really want to think about filing. I just want to dump it there. And so there's a lot of us that, we probably straddle that divide, right? But the reason I had this slide here is that we hear almost on a daily basis, and I wanted to address it now, that Loop is going to replace OneNote. Does anybody hear that? Yeah? Yeah, you hear it? You've said it.
I do.
I didn't say it. Yeah, we get this a lot, especially from, IT circles, developer circles, that, this is the way. And it just really goes back to a debate that was happening at the beginning of this product, which is highly structured versus a bit disorganized and, probably more reflective of the way human minds work. The two are both important and very good use cases for notes, but they're different. And often what we're looking for in a note-taking application, we're going to see some examples as I jump into this. They are structured, they need structure. So when we look at things like meeting minutes and action items, things like that, this is the team-based task for note-taking. That's really important, and structure is really helpful in that case. When it comes to our personal notes, those little bits and pieces of information, our personal to-do lists, or whether it's just the things that we need to think about and memorize in our meetings, that often can take a bit more of a fluid and unstructured form. So we have the need for these two things. And what we're going to see in our demos here is that the two are really complementary, and OneNote is going nowhere. If I have my way, at least. No, it's not going anywhere. It's a really important product in the Microsoft suite and continues to be, even though Loop's probably taken away a few of the things that people do really frequently in terms of note-taking. Sure. All right, maybe we can get a show of hands or a thumbs up. Does anybody here use Loop? Matt, you just report in and tell me how many thumbs you saw go up there. Did you count them?
There's plenty.
Loads going up, yeah.
All right, awesome. Cool, and some hands up as well. Awesome. All right, now, one of the reasons that and I think this is my final point on this before I get to demos. One of the reasons that OneNote suits the piler, right, the people who want to take informal notes, especially those personal notes, is that it is a multimodal application. Right, we think Matt and I, we talk a lot about multimodal computing. We talk about the need to move beyond the keyboard and the mouse. We'll do some demos today using voice input into OneNote. Perhaps we can get that thumbs up going again, and you can give me a read on this. But does anybody type into OneNote with their voice at all? Any thumbs up there?
Yeah, get plenty. Yep.
Cool. All right. Yeah, that's great. So voice and audio is really important. I don't know if you have all seen the captions coming up on my screen. I don't know if anybody's using this in PowerPoint, but it's a really important piece of accessible tech. This is using voice recognition in Office. It's the same voice recognition that we'll use in OneNote. And it works best when we have devices that really support that. So my Surface here, it's got a dual microphone setup that tends to work really well in these sorts of room scenarios. All right.
There's a few surprise faces there, so maybe it's a feature that people may not actually know exists as well.
Well, we're going to see it in action in our demos, so that's great. That's great to hear. I'm really excited about that, because what we see, again, is that most people are shocked that the dictate button is there. Here it is right here, actually, on my screen cap of OneNote. It's right there on the home ribbon. So it's sort of been hiding in plain sight for people. It's in Word, it's in Outlook, it's in PowerPoint. You won't find it in Excel, but it is in Windows. So you can still type in Windows with your voice. So, and if you haven't tried that, just to set the scene on that, if you maybe tried it a couple of years ago, maybe 3+ years ago, try it again. Because in the last 3 years, Microsoft bought a company called Nuance Communications, right? Who are known for Dragon, naturally speaking. Yeah. Do you remember Dragon? Does anybody still use it? No? No thumbs up there. Dragon, yeah, was really popular in certain spaces like the legal world, but Nuance had some specific voice recognition technology that they use in the medical field. And that the AI engine that they have, Microsoft acquired for good reason, and it has really improved the voice recognition capabilities of Office in the last 3 years. So, like I said, if you have tried that in the past, go back and try it again. It works in a local accent. So even though I'm speaking in real broad Aussie, you know, it will if you set it to the UK mode, probably. Yeah. But I don't know how far you can go with this, because the Scottish accent's pretty broad, right? Like there's a big scope there. The Highlander. Let's give it a try later. But it's fun to work with, right? So you can set it to your own local accent. And there's even New Zealand. Like they actually differentiate between Australia and New Zealand in that accent list, which you go, what's the difference, right? That's the way an American would view things anyway. All right, so let's have a look at this demo here. So this is sort of related to Copilot, but I just wanted to set the scene and show you how a Loop and OneNote are really crossing over here with the meeting details experience. So let's just jump on in here, and I'll sort of stop and start this. So I don't know if anybody's used this, but the meeting details button that I'm just pointing out there, I'll just pause it there. It's been there for a long time in OneNote. I think it came in around about 2010. So this used to be a direct integration between Outlook and OneNote. So in other words, you'd have your OneNote open and you click that button, it would load Outlook in the background and it would look up your diary and show you the list of meetings. And you could do that from OneNote without having Outlook open, which was good because your Outlook was always just a list of emails. You know, how many times have you been to a meeting where everybody sat and did their emails together? Like, did we just book this so that we could do emails side by side, or were we here to have a meeting? Yeah. So if we can get people to go to their meetings without Outlook open, that's an absolutely good thing. But this has been improved and changed. So in the last couple of years, it changed from being an Outlook direct integration, which was kind of clunky. It's now a cloud experience, as you'll see. But it's recently been improved to include Teams. It's not just Outlook anymore, right? It's the whole Teams thing. So what we're going to see here, when I click on my meeting details, I'm going to go and look up a meeting from Friday. And I'll click on the meeting, and pretty quickly it's grabbed the details. That's in real time there, right? So it's grabbed the details and dropped it into the page. We used to, in our, Matt and I started out doing Surface training, right? And we'd actually show this feature last in all of our training sessions when we were doing Surface training. because it was the most impactful for people. Like the ability to pull in all of the details of the meeting and have it on a blank sheet of paper was really, really powerful for people. But as you can see here now, this is now integrated with the whole Teams thing. So in this case, the Teams invitation, or the meeting invitation went out through Teams, and it had a loop component embedded in it. Now that loop component could be the meeting agenda from the Teams calendar. Right? This wasn't, but it could have been. And it's going to show there right here in OneNote. So I've loaded up my personal page with the meeting agenda from Teams sitting there in that loop component on the canvas of the page. So let me just keep playing through here. I'll come back to that in a second, but I think what I'm going to do here in this demo, because I just recorded this so I didn't have to do it in person, was, I've turned on lines on the page here, and I'm going to just take handwritten notes. So again, this is one of the things that we really love about OneNote is the ability, because it's a free-form canvas, the ability to treat this as though it's a digital piece of paper and to use a pen on it is one of my favorite things about OneNote. So what I've done over here is I've just written a couple of notes. I think I've sped up this sequence here. Eventually, when I finally click on the right pen, here we go. So you can see me just scribbling my notes. My handwriting's messy, right? But OneNote can still read that handwriting, and it turns it into typed text in the background so it can be searched, which is fantastic. But I'm taking those handwritten notes alongside of this typed up formal information over here. So this is my personal notes. I've added my visual and spatial highlights. These are the keys to memory. So, you know, when you're taking notes, we do tend to do those sorts of things, right? We scribble and underline under something, we highlight something, and then it's connected to all of this. So the invitation message with the loop component there, and then I'm going to go down in a second. There's JM, and all right, the list of participants is there. All right, so I'm going to pause here. So the AI-powered meeting summary. Interestingly, this is not Copilot. So this is the AI meeting summary that comes from Teams Premium. So if you didn't know that, if all you care about is just getting an AI produced set of notes from your meeting, Teams Premium will do that for about $10 a month as opposed to Copilot for $45, right? If that's all you're doing, that's what that is just there. So this could be Copilot content, but in this case, it's not. So it will actually automatically populate a summary of the meeting, and you can drill down on each individual component of that to see a bit more detail, and it will even suggest tasks from the meeting. And so I'm seeing all of that in the meeting details page. Now, imagine you put the meeting details on the page and then you wrote your notes, the recording, the AI meeting summary. That hasn't happened yet, but you can, with this experience, you can go back and refresh the details so that they are all sitting alongside of your personal notes. So the things that you flagged as important in that meeting, or the ideas that you had, you've jotted them down, and you can compare them to what ended up on the task list. Does that make sense? All right, so that's the first thing that I wanted to call out, even though it's not directly a Copilot thing right now. Okay. So, Matt, you there?
Yes.
Every time I've run through this presentation, I forgot what this demo is. And I don't have it in presenter mode, so I can't tell what it is. Oh, yeah, so, okay, this is transcribe. Okay, this is one of my favorite things, and I think this is one of the most powerful things about OneNote and Copilot together right now. All right, so there's a lot of things I think in here that are misses. I'm going to talk about them in a minute. But so, you know, maybe sort of going along from having the meeting details on the page, I think I'd imagine most of us on the call are pretty familiar with the fact that if you record or transcribe your Teams meeting, that you can get a Copilot summary out, or as we just saw, you could get the Teams Premium summary out of that meeting, which is fantastic. But what if the meeting's in person? Could you get the same thing if the meeting's in person? And the answer is yes, you can with OneNote, because in OneNote, we can actually transcribe the meeting and record it as though we were on a Teams call. Now, I'd suggest, in fact, it's a legal obligation. I'm pretty sure here in New South Wales that it's a legal obligation that if you want to record a conversation in person, especially, you need to ask for permission, right? So let's just assume that you've done that, you followed the regulations, and if not, the courtesy that you should extend to somebody if you want to record them. But imagine that we're all having a meeting here in person, we're not on a Teams call and we want to get a transcript. We want to get a meeting summary out of that conversation without having to have somebody sit there and type up the meeting minutes or the notes. Well, we can do that with this feature here in OneNote. So the feature there, call out at the top. So it's near the meeting details and the dictate button. It's called transcribe, and you'll find that experience in Word and you'll find it here in OneNote. I think it's best in OneNote. Just a little caveat right now, in my experience at least, and I've tried this on quite a few devices, I need to set the language to English US to make this work. It seems to still work with local accents just fine. But if I leave the language model as English Australian, it just doesn't come back with anything right now. I think it's a bug. I've reported it, but I haven't seen it fixed yet, right? So we'll talk about feedback at the end. But just notice the list of English variants that are there in that language model, right? So English Philippines, English Singapore, right? You wouldn't think that there should be so many models, but there really are, because there's just so many different accents that people are going to have, right? So again, for now though, I'm just choosing English US in the demo. Right, so what I did here, I actually just recorded a short conversation that Matt and I were having. So I clicked on start recording there. So we pulled up the transcribe panel, we hit start recording. And this is different. Actually, a lot of people, I'll just pause this for a second. A lot of people think when they see the dictate button in all those other apps, they go, wow, I could transcribe my meetings. We go, no, that's not what it is. When you use dictate, that's just converting your voice straight away into typed text and typing it up. That won't know that there's different people speaking. So it won't have the detail to be able to differentiate and really give you a proper transcript with timestamps and all those sorts of things. It's just going to type up your text. So it's a little bit hit and miss. It's good if you're just trying to dictate an article or something like that. You can make corrections as you go, but it's not good for the meeting scenario. So transcribe is the tool for that. So I'll keep playing through. So you see that I've hit the button. It's recording over there, and I'm writing my notes. And I've got my device flat on the desk, and I'm writing my notes. Flat on the desk is really good because the audio is going to work much better. And it's also much more open and transparent when we're having a meeting, as opposed to me sitting behind my laptop, right? So I get a really good benefit on multiple fronts there. All right, so I'm just going to pause it here, because you can see now that transcribe has listed out over on the right-hand side here all of the speakers, and it's got speaker 1, which happens to be Matt. I know it is. I could play back the audio and find out who it is, right? And then there's just speaker 1, speaker. These are different people. So based on that audio input, it's been able to go, there's different people in this room. We don't know who they are. It's not like Teams where you could record your voice and upload that. Can't do that. It's not going to identify people. But what I can do is go and select, and you'll see this in the demo here. I'll go and select each individual person and then just type in their name, tick the box that says, change this for every instance of speaker, and then it will go through the transcript and update it all based on that. So I'll do that for both myself and for Matt. So Matt happened to be on a Teams call while we were doing this, but generally we're going to be doing this in person. So it's possible to do this. Remember to ask for permission. Great, so there's my transcript, okay? So I've cut this screen off a little bit, but down the bottom there's a button there that allows me to add this to the page, which I'll do in a second. And there's lots of options for adding it to the page. You can see there that I could add it with the timestamps if I wanted to. I'll choose the bottom option there with give it all to me, because I know that Copilot can go through that and find the information that it needs from the transcript. But you'll also see that there is a recording on the page there. So there's an audio file that's attached to the page so that I can listen back to the meeting if I want to and compare it to the transcript, because we know that it's going to make mistakes, right? Voice recognition is never going to be 100% correct. But there's my transcript and my recording. I'm just going to move the content container there in OneNote just so that it looks a little bit better on the page, resize it, and there's my transcript underneath it. So what I'm going to do now is open up the Copilot panel and get Copilot to process this and turn it into a summary of the meeting. Now, I could have gone further with this, but I just did a real quick demo here. I went back and I said, can you summarize the transcript on this page? It found that content and it produced a really good meeting summary for me. This is just a short summary. I could have gone back in the prompt and gone, give me a bit longer of a summary. I need 3 paragraphs on this, and give me the action items separately, all of those sorts of prompts that you'd be familiar with doing. We could do that there. Actually, I'm just going to pause there. I'll come back to this, but what I love about Copilot in general, whether you're using it, the free version on the web, or whether you're using it in Office, Microsoft 365, the references, right? That it'll actually tell you where that stuff came from, and it's going to reference back to the transcript there. Again, I could play back the transcript and I can do all of that together, and I can even compare that to the notes that I took because they're all together in the same pile of notes, right? So I've copied out the summary and I've just pasted it in this case on the bottom of the page. I'll zoom in on that, but I could have pasted that summary into an email confirmation with the customer or whoever I'm meeting and said, this is what we talked about, checked it over, and then sent it straight off, right? So that's an in-person meeting, and I can get an AI meeting summary out of that. I think that's probably the most powerful thing that we could do with Copilot right now in OneNote. All right.
Very
Sure.
good.
So, Matt, so I'm not leaning on you much, Matt, today, am I?
That's right. You're going well. I mean, this was a conversation we had about this very topic, right? But the ability to keep conversing with your notes through Copilot after the notes are taken is what we love about the capabilities. And it leads into what you're going to talk about now, around what part the humans play in this, right? So even the question, Brett, I'll go back. Let's ask this question of you. So why would I want to take notes alongside my typed up formal notes? Why would I still want to put the effort into personal note taking if I had shared notes in a loop component or in a formal agenda?
We definitely see a trend towards less people taking notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question is, well, what part do humans play? Like a lot of the presentations that I see Microsoft people doing on this topic, I see them saying, I pulled up Sarah Carney the other day on this, she's one of the senior leadership in Australia here, and she said in a presentation something like, you know, one of my favorite features about Copilot is that I didn't have to go to that meeting, you know, and you hear this kind of thing all the time, right? I didn't have to go to that meeting. Well, why do we have the meetings in the first place if you didn't need to go to them? So I think that the point I wanted to make here is that we collectively, this is not an Australian issue, this is a worldwide issue, but we really need to, I mean, people have been thinking about meeting culture for a long time, but we need to do something about it because it's bad. Right? How many meetings that sit in your diary are status update meetings? It could have been handled by an email or even better, a task management tool. Yeah. People just need to know where the project's at when they really could have seen it on a Power BI dashboard or in the Planner tool, right? How many of your meetings are just presentations where you sit there, you don't interact? How many of your presentations are actually for thinking? Sorry, not presentations. How many of your meetings are actually for thinking? What part do the humans play in this? When do we send our AI to meet with your AI? And we decide, you know, we supervise the outputs.
Well, let the AIs make the outputs. Why would we get involved in that case, right? So, yeah.
What are we here to do? I mean, what we can do and what we need to do, as we've seen, even like for me creating this presentation with Copilot and PowerPoint, we need to think. We need to apply our nuance. We need to be able to use our brains to connect concepts together in ways that AI can't and will never do. So we need to stay ahead of it by rethinking our role. And when we see people say to us, I've replaced all of our note taking with Loop or with AI or whatever it is, we go, I wonder what the value of you is in that meeting. And it's probably not very high. So we really need to think about that, right? So leads us into the next demo here, which is a really cool thing that happened. I was kind of surprised to see that this wasn't in the early versions of Copilot in OneNote. But what I'm going to do here is actually query my handwritten notes that I took in a meeting just recently. So when Copilot first came out, it couldn't do this, which was a surprise to us, as I said, because OneNote has always been able to recognize handwriting as typed text. So in the background, in the page, the moment you scribble something down with a digital pen, and by the way, this is not the way most people use OneNote. Most people type into OneNote. That's okay. But if you did use a digital pen like I have here, OneNote's already recognized it as typed text. So the text was always sitting there in the background, ready to be queried. You could always search for things in your handwritten notes. And we've done some really awesome demos on that. But now Copilot can actually go through your notes and give you a summary out of your handwritten notes. As you can see, it would do very well if it could make sense of my handwritten notes here because it's a mess. Yeah. But it actually did. When I queried it and said, were there any action items from this page? It found this one that I've highlighted there, that I needed to send somebody a summary of our platform, right? Now, when I ran this query this time, it didn't give me a fantastic answer and I suspect that it's because I'd added the previous answer onto the page. I pasted the previous answer, which I'll show you in a second. But you can see that it's a mess, this particular answer. But this is the original answer that I got when I queried this page. So I guess there's two things here, and I'm sure a lot of you are really familiar with this, but don't hesitate to ask Copilot to do the question again, because we need to do that. And I think I'll show you in a demo in a minute how you can create a new chat with Copilot, because sometimes it gets confused over time, which it may have done here. But you'll see here what it did is it queried the notes on the page, and it found Brett to provide summary on the platform, on a platform, whatever that was. But it also started to query, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is the graph. Is that right, Daniel?
It is.
Yeah, cool. So it's gone into the graph as well. And it's given me answers from my Teams meetings, from emails, and all of the other data sources that OneNote, or Copilot, I should say, can access. Right, so that was kind of interesting. Not very helpful in this particular case, but it was able to find that action item in my handwritten scribbles there, which I think is pretty amazing. All right, so on to the next demo. So I wanted to just do a couple of demos here, which is just around what OneNote can do with content on the page. And I have to say, I didn't have fantastic results here. So we ran into some limitations real quick here. So let's play this video. So what I did here is I used the OneNote web clipper. Actually, I'll just pause that. I'll come back to that. To capture an article on whiteboards and why whiteboards are important. Does anybody here, let's get a thumbs up going again on that call. Anybody use the OneNote web clipper to capture articles and bits and pieces of information into OneNote?
Love it.
Love it. It's an awesome tool, isn't it? Right. I can't tell you how many times.
Lots of thumbs up on this. So
thanks. That's
awesome.
awesome.
Converted here. It's good.
That's great. If you don't, then go and investigate the OneNote web clipper. Yeah, great way to capture content directly in. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've got a source of information that's no longer on the web, but I have it in my library, in my research library here in OneNote. So what I did is I went to this page and I tried to do some queries on it. But first I actually cleared the chat history because I was starting to get some weird answers. I'm sure if a lot of the people on the call have been using Copilot for a while and you've experienced this. Just in case you didn't know, the way to do that with Copilot Microsoft 365, at least in the sidebar, is to click on chat history, which is usually up the top of the sidebar. And then at the top right, you'll see here, click on new chat. And that's going to clean the slate, start a new conversation so that you can continue on a theme, and Copilot's going to give you answers along that theme. So what I said here is, are there any other notes in this notebook about whiteboards? That's what I wanted to know, because there could have been other pages that I've captured around the theme, and I wanted to try and start collating all of this together. Now, it's come back to me with lots of references and a big, long summary here. But what this summary told me pretty quickly is that Copilot has no idea what a notebook is in OneNote. So that was a bit of a disappointment. It only queried the page. So as I click on some of these links, you'll see that it hyperlinks to OneNote, to the paragraph. Don't know if you know this, but you can actually hyperlink to a specific paragraph in OneNote. Super handy for pointing people to content, or, hey, this is the paragraph we're talking about here. But that's not what I wanted. I was looking for more information across this notebook. I was trying to limit the search scope, trying to be smart about it, but it didn't really work. So I went back and asked another question. I said, okay, that was from the page, but I want you to check through the notebook. Should have said I'd sped up this sequence here, but here we go. What about the rest of the notebook? And again, it became very quickly apparent that I had no idea what a notebook is. So there's a bit of a gap here in the way Copilot works in OneNote, and I think Copilot in general. So it's come back with all sorts of references from the graph for me. And as I drill down on these, you'll see that there's Word documents, there's Excel spreadsheets, there's PowerPoint presentations, even Teams conversations on channels, heaps of information. But do you notice what's missing there? OneNote doesn't exist as far as Copilot is concerned. This is a bit of a problem. And maybe, Daniel, you might know, there's some of that future roadmap stuff that they were talking about. Maybe this will expand.
I'm pretty sure, Brett, that we're limited to sections at the moment from a Copilot implementation. You can ask it to summarize a section, but you will run in, if you've got big sections, you will run into limits on how far it can search. I know, like, obviously, it's, we get this brand new tool and I go and ask it to summarize my most extensive section in my most extensive notebook and was disappointed with the results, which realistically I shouldn't have been.
And I'll show just a slight nuance on that in a second. But so when we go to summarize, if you right click on a piece of content, you can summarize it, but you'll pretty quickly hit the 20,000 word limitation. So again, I don't know whether that's going to change based on that roadmap that you talked about, Daniel, earlier with the bigger document support. But currently in OneNote, the 20,000 word limitation, for me, rules out most of my notebooks because they're way too big for that, right? Even though my sections are usually over 20,000 pages, 20,000 words, sorry. So that's to do with the ChatGPT token size limits. We know that this will change over time, but that's where we're at right now. So, but on top of that problem, so that's when you're directly trying to query, like I was there, the notebook, or to summarize a notebook, but also the graph. It's not, so if you go and do Delve, right, you will find OneNote search results. If you do a search in Microsoft 365, you'll absolutely find your search results in OneNote, but they're not visible right now to Copilot, and I suspect that's only a matter of time. All right, so that was a disappointment. All right, so the next demo that I did here, I think, was to try and get a summary out of that. Now, this is ChatGPT's bread and butter, right? This is Copilot's bread and butter. So I just went in here and I said, you know what, create me a PowerPoint presentation based on this page. So imagine I typed up a script or something like that. I've written an article and I want to turn that into a blog post or a PowerPoint presentation or something like that. Of course, Copilot's going to be able to do that. So I ran the query and it did a reasonable job. Now, it didn't create a PowerPoint presentation for me. Not like it would have in, is it Word that you can do that from, or is it PowerPoint that you need to use pull a Word document? So in PowerPoint, you pull a Word document in and you can turn that into a PowerPoint presentation. I've always said to people that the place to start a PowerPoint presentation is OneNote. And the reason for that is that PowerPoint is full of formatting decisions. Have you ever heard Mark Zuckerberg talk about how he just wears one T-shirt? Yeah, same T-shirt every day. All right, we don't want to think about what to wear until we know what it is that we want to talk about, right? So that's why I've always said to people, plan your presentation in OneNote because you're not going to get sidetracked with formatting, page breaks, all of those sorts of things. But there's no pathway to turn that content from, I'll just go back here a little bit, to take that content from OneNote into PowerPoint. However, it will do a great job of summarizing your content and suggesting what the PowerPoint should look like. So it's a really good start point. So what I did here, it suggested 11 slides based on this article that I captured. I went and copied that and I pasted it into a OneNote page. And then I could go and add some pictures to it, plan out the content a little bit more before I manually copied and pasted that over into PowerPoint. So is that a fail? Not quite. I think it was
work in progress.
In fact, when I heard from, I was talking to a customer today and they were saying they're quite frustrated. Maybe there's a solution to this. Maybe you guys can tell me. But they are frustrated because when you do that automatic PowerPoint generation, it won't do it on your company, master, slide master. It can't do this. Right, okay, cool. So there might be a solution to that anyway, but that's what they were telling me today. And I said, you know what, it's better anyway if you be the pilot and, do the work in OneNote before you bring it into PowerPoint anyway, even though it's a little bit of copy and pasting. All right, so I moved on from that and I just wanted to sort of, just try out a couple of different things. Again, this is Copilot's bread and butter. Just I wanted to organize this page into a table. You can do those sorts of basic tasks pretty easily, right? Although it did come back to me with some weird formatting issues where it had picked up the HTML break characters and slotted them into the text for me. So, you know, not a high value gain, I think, in being able to do this, but you know, we can use Copilot to do these sorts of basic text things. Now, just wanted to pause here for a second, because one thing I didn't understand, and again, probably a lot of you who come to these sorts of things, and I have to say this is my first one, so thanks for having me and thanks for bringing this to my attention, Dan. But you might realize that the sidebar, the Copilot sidebar, really can't interact with the content, at least not in OneNote. I don't know how it is in other apps, right? But if you right-click on a section heading or a notebook or a page or even a paragraph, a selection of text in OneNote, you'll see the Copilot prompt there. And here you can do some actions on the page. So I'm going to show that in a second, but I just found that kind of interesting, the nuance between the two. This one can interact with the content. The one on the side can only suggest text for you, which I kind of hope that they resolve down the track.
Same in Word, right? So when you use Word, it's a summary of the content.
Yep.
Similar thing that you're doing there in Word when you select it, right?
And I think this was the same demo that I did here, or similar. Was I just wanted to demonstrate how, so going back to the AI meeting summary that was powered by Teams Premium there, in our previous example meeting, AI's already generated the tasks for me down the bottom, but I just wanted to ignore that. And so I just selected the text of the summary, right-clicked and said, make a summary. So let's have a look at that. And this is the last demo I had. So I did to do as the option there. So what it did is it created a list of tasks based on that summary. So it's suggesting these are the tasks out of all of that. So it's a lot less text. I've zoomed in on it here, but it's just using the OneNote to do tag, which is a pretty basic and arbitrary tag. You can search based on these tags. You know, it's an interesting, nice to have. It's got some potential as a workflow, I guess, in some certain situations. So yeah, those are the key demos that I had for you there. So we get to the future announcements and the roadmap, the public roadmap at least, of OneNote and Copilot. And really what's on the roadmap is Mac and iPad. Not much more than that. In fact, there's nothing mentioned on the public roadmap apart from that. Mac and iPad will get Copilot in December, I believe. So that's when it's scheduled. So if you're using those platforms, you can look forward to that. Apart from that, you know, other significant features on the OneNote roadmap are the Sticky Notes app that is kind of, it's out, it's shipped already, but I don't know if anybody's investigated that, but if anybody in the past has done the OneNote linked note-taking experience, it's kind of a bit of a riff off that in the Sticky Notes app. It's probably worth having a look at. But that said, what's on the public roadmap is not necessarily what ships in the product, right? So the ink recognition feature, or the Copilot ink querying that I demoed there, that wasn't on the roadmap. It just popped in there. So we do expect to see, you know, updates and improvements as we go along. And obviously a lot of those Copilot roadmap things that you mentioned are probably going to affect Copilot in OneNote as well. So yeah. So there was a few limitations there, though, that we experienced, right? I wouldn't say it was like a fantastic sizzle reel of awesome things that we can do in OneNote, but I think there is some potential in there.
The only thing that you see on the OneNote stuff that's coming out, side page. It's on the inside page, the only place that they actually put in their blog what's coming out. It's frustrating.
There was an interesting feed in, which is that the Teams experience, I don't know if you've seen that recently, where the AI notes will automatically populate the loop component. Yeah. And I know I saw that at an MVP thing years ago, and I thought I was going crazy because it never happened, but it is public now. So that's going to be pretty cool, because instead of having that separate summary, we'll actually be able to populate the loop component directly. And I think that helps the use case for your personal notes in OneNote. But I wanted to talk just briefly about giving your feedback, right? Because, you know, I think that it's really early stages for this product and the Copilot product within OneNote. And we know from meeting with the OneNote team every year and regularly outside of that your suggestions really matter, and they actually get read by human beings on the other end. So there's people there that just collate and read those feedback. So do remember when you're giving feedback that there's a human being on the end of it. I know we can get a little bit hot under the collar sometimes with features that don't work like we expect them to. But yeah, so that button right up in the top right corner of OneNote, click the button and you can just immediately provide feedback. So feedback on Copilot, feedback on other features within OneNote. I really highly encourage you to do that. I want to seed a few ideas for you on feedback. Matt, if you can help me out with the run sheet in OneNote here. But one of the ones that I thought this would be a really cool thing if Copilot could do this. I don't know if you've come across this, right? But a lot of executives, senior executives have like a day book. And in the past, the EA used to print out all the meeting notes for the day, the agendas, and give it in a physical book. And we helped a lot of those people move across to OneNote to do that because it was a digital format. They could get the latest day book very, very quickly. But I kind of want that for myself. Like every meeting that I go to, I want to have a page there ready to go. And I want to just go to Copilot and go make my day book, right? Create the pages for me with the meeting details on it. That sort of automation stuff would be really cool. That pathway from OneNote to PowerPoint, they're suggestions that I've put in as feedback.
The increasing ability to have more conversations with your notes. I mean, we've both been using OneNote for 20 years. We have 20 years worth of notes and research, things that we've captured that we've forgotten about. Being able to converse with those notes at a deeper level than what we currently are is, it's obviously coming. We don't have it yet, but that's definitely an area of feedback that we want to see this going, because it's our history of thinking really in OneNote with the multimodal input from low formality right through to structured content. It's a history of it's really our own large language model. Really, it is that we've been building for 20 years.
And maybe some of those new cool features with SharePoint. It'll be interesting to see whether we could do that on a OneNote file where you could create your own chat Copilot. From a file. It'll be interesting to see whether that makes it in there as well. So yeah, but make sure that you jump in and give that feedback anyway, because it really does shape the product. So and we've seen that in action over the years. So that's it from us. Do you have any questions? And I'll check in with the chat as well.
Yeah, there's one here just about, when you did the to-do list or the tags, does that sync back to to-do?
Yeah, there's a gap there in features in Outlook right now. Sorry, in OneNote. Yes, good question. It does not. Those to-do tags are very arbitrary. They're just on the page. Like I said, you can search them, but that is not Outlook tags. I don't know if anybody uses that functionality. Let me just actually switch over to OneNote here. So if you want to, so this is the to-do tag just here in OneNote. Outlook tasks might be what the person was alluding to in the question there, which is a great question. So it's basically the same functionality on the OneNote page, but this one actually directly integrates with Outlook. So if I flag a note here, if I selected something, and I said, this is an Outlook task, it needs to be done today, it recognizes that handwriting, or if it was text already, doesn't need to do that work, puts it into Outlook as a task, which then shows up in to-do courtesy of Outlook. But this is an old direct integration between Outlook and OneNote. It hasn't been migrated to to a cloud experience like the meeting details functionality has yet. So if you switch to the new Outlook, which is causing us no end of problems, right? Great idea, Microsoft. It won't work, right? So your tasks just go nowhere. So just to be aware of that, this is an old feature. So Copilot's not using this feature, and probably for good reason. But I do expect that Outlook tasks and that email page functionality will move to the cloud at some point, because they have to. They can't keep being based on the Outlook 32-bit client, the desktop client anymore. So does that answer that question?
It does.
In an adequate way?
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you for the question. It's a good one.
I've got one for you. What about, so what are your thoughts on Loop versus OneNote, and how's that going to play out, do you think?
Yeah, look, I got a couple of comments on that. So the first thing is, right, we really underestimate the value of low formality thinking. And low formality thinking isn't done in text. It's done in images and visual and with a pen. And because of the file type that Loop components are, there's no way that's ever coming to Loop. that I can see. Having talked to the product team about this recently as well, and their comment when I asked them about this is, hey, can I get low formality into Loop? They go, well, Loop is for things that are beyond the idea stage. It's for the planning and the action stage. That's their result. So, I've got Whiteboard and I've got OneNote to do that low formality thinking. You can do it in a Word document or PowerPoint slide deck that I can't do it in Loop.
To just expand on that a little bit, Matt, we did an exercise a couple of years ago and we turned it into a thing, an infographic, because everybody has to have one, right? But we called it the cycle of work, where we tried to break down work into its individual pieces. And I was really shocked to not really find that anybody had done this before. And what we found was any piece of work that comes along, whether that's at the project level or whether it's just asking someone to do something, there's usually a conversation that starts that process off. And as a part of that conversation, there's often an ideation process. So what is it that we need to do here? What's going to be involved? What are the contingencies that we need to think about? What could happen, right? That discussion tends to happen in an informal way. And in the past, it used to happen with a whiteboard quite a lot. There's a whiteboard at the back of this room, for example. And we just see those whiteboards have gone dormant, and that's a bad thing, because what happens is people try to jump into high formality and start typing up the bullet point list, but we don't think that way, right? Our brains aren't really activated that way. That step is the next step when we move from the ideation into the plan, right? So that's a really important step. We try and skip ideation all the time, and we do ourselves a disservice by doing it. We're not really thinking through the problems before we get to going and making plans and doing stuff. Most people skip the planning phase, to be honest, as well. They go straight to work. I was presenting on this theme of what we call the cycle of work, and this lady is a lawyer at a Victorian government agency. She came to me and she just went, my boss does this all the time. She just sets a task and I go and do it and I give it to her and she goes, nah, don't care about that anymore, and we've moved on, right? And she's like, it's such a waste of time. And if we had just done the ideation, we would have resolved that it wasn't going to be worth our time. Yeah. And I wouldn't have to waste all my time. This is a lawyer, so a senior person who's doing wasted work because people aren't doing justice to that early stage of work. So that's where we really see that OneNote fits. It's your ideas, it's your notes, it's your ideation. That's the phase that it works at. And that happens in meetings all the time. It needs to happen more in meetings. Loop is for the next step. It's for the action items, the summary of what we've decided to do. That's where Loop really comes in, and it's amazing for them. What's that, sorry?
Will it build the client anyway for the client?
Will it build a client? I don't see why not. And in fact, I think that there's more time. We're giving ourselves more time here, right? So we're building the client. It's good.
What about the Copilot, the handwriting recognition? So using Copilot to summarize it, how have you found that, accuracy wise?
It really depends on your handwriting inputs. And I do think that there's still a fair bit of work that Microsoft needs to do on their handwriting recognition model. It's not as good as others anymore. Yeah. Like they led the market. They had handwriting recognition in the 90s, right? And they did. Yeah.
Teaching it was amazing.
Yeah. Back in the XP days, we used to teach it. They pulled that out in Windows 10, I think, and or broke it. But we shouldn't have to do that these days, though, because the AI is good enough to be able to recognize consistently the handwriting anyway. Yeah. So they've done some work on that to improve it. But it will certainly benefit if you slow down your writing a little bit. I tend not to slow down my writing. I just scribble, and that's bad. You won't get good handwriting recognition results. If you have neater handwriting than I do, which would be 99% of the population, you'll be better. It'll be better at it because it is pretty amazing, but it's just not quite where I want it to be. You can also handwrite in the OneNote, in the Copilot panel. I've demoed this, but I didn't include it in my demo because it's so bad. So
your handwriting's so bad, or Copilot's so bad?
This is where you write. Okay, yeah. There's not enough room. It is impossible to correct stuff.
Yeah, it's really poor.
Can't expand the window. It's really poor, right? It's as frustrating as anything. And you could use the handwriting recognition panel at Windows, but it's not where it needs to be. So I feel like it was like an intern got given a job to go make that work, and then they did, and then it's left at that point. So please give feedback on that.
Mind you, Brett, that writing experience is pretty much the same as writing into any field in Windows now. It's great you can write directly into fields in Windows, but the editing features are just missing. correcting and editing. It's just not happening.
It's not where it needs to be. But that's some of the work that I'd really like to see done. I think that there could be a really powerful OneNote integration with Copilot there, where you could do commands with your pen as you're writing notes, like go and get me some information on this while you write more notes. You know, the scenarios of writing things down that we tend to that sort of have gone by the wayside now is like I'm in a meeting like this and I have an idea, and our response too often is to interrupt and go, I've got this idea, right? To over talk somebody, instead of just writing it down and parking it for when you get a moment to bring it up. Because we're not writing it down, I'm going to lose the thought if I don't say it right now, right? So that urgency and that sort of thing that people have, and these tools kind of encourage a little bit. I think that, you know, that's one of the key reasons that you really need to be present with note taking in a meeting, especially with a pen. Yeah.
Well, both of you you've done quite a bit of research, well, across quite a bit of the research on handwriting versus typing notes in meetings and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's not enough, I think, done on this, but there are some researchers who've done a lot of work more in the education space. But what I'd like to see is research done in the meeting arena. But really what the education research informs us is that our brain works very differently when we handwrite versus when we type. So Van der Wiel, two researchers from the University of Norway, have done a couple of studies now. I think there's one in 2019, one in 2021, on the difference in brain activity between people who are handwriting with a pen versus typing. They used a computer for both of these scenarios. They happened to use a Surface device to do it. That wasn't sponsored by Microsoft, these papers, but they had people draw on the Surface and they had people type on the Surface. What they found was far more activations in the occipital and parietal regions of the brain. This is related to your visual, so your visual cortex and your spatial cortex. There's an interesting exercise here, right? So visual and spatial. Our memory is visual and spatial predominantly. And what they're saying is that if you write with a pen, you will activate far more neurons in those spaces, more brain activity. Their words were, it creates more hooks to hang your memories on. So you're going to remember things far better if you write them down with a pen than if you type them. A lot of people think that, oh no, everybody will learn, our brains will change to adapt to typing. It's just not the way our physiology is, right? So a great exercise for you to try with OneNote if you have a device with a pen. Now that could be an iPad, that could be a, let me just flip over to OneNote here. Here it is. Is when you go to a meeting, I'll just use this note as an example. Do this, right? By the way, one of the things that's probably really subtle that you may not have noticed in OneNote is that there's a lot of pen improvements that have happened over the last 2 years, I'd say. For example, there's the ability to just hold your pen still at the end of a line to draw a shape. So that could be anything up to a hexagon. It will convert the shape to a proper shape for you. But this is the table that we're sitting around. If I wanted to remember your names, right, what I'm going to do, Grant, I had that in my head and I was just too afraid to say it. Grant, sorry. Sharon. Right. Richard, cool. Get what I'm doing here? Kirsty, I know. Why? Kirsty with a Y.
And an S.
Bell?
Mel.
Mel, sorry.
You can be Bell if it's not.
Mel? Tom? What was it, sorry?
KWOKWAI.
KW. Okay. Quack. Yeah. WAI. Quack Y.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Tyler, that's right. Cool. And at the back? What was it?
EUS.
Can you relay that up for me? I'm old.
EUS.
Thanks, Kirsty. Yeah.
US.
EUS.
US.
Oh, yeah, US. And how do you say that? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. All right. Oscar. All right, cool. All right, you get the idea. Okay, so this is the exercise. If you do this, you will have a very good chance, depending on the time of day, how tired you are, but of remembering people's names in the room. And when you address people by their name, Grant, right, they will feel good about it. And it's a really good rapport building exercise. And then when people move, so let's just say Kirsty got up and moved, and she moved over to this spot here, right? You could actually just move them around, because people do move around in the room, right? So what you're doing is you're placing people in space. And we've got a really powerful spatial memory that nobody's really aware of, right? You know, have you ever heard like memory hack people talk about the memory castle? That's what it is, right? You don't need to build a memory castle. You just need to arrange things in space, right? So it's a good exercise for you to prove to yourself that memory is very visual and spatial, and handwriting will work far better in the scenario. How would you do that with typed text? You could do it, but it's very difficult.
Very
right?
confident.
So, yeah. So, good exercise just to prove that to yourself anecdotally, but the research is pretty clear that that is a superior way to take notes, because we take notes to remember things, right? So if you want to remember them, use a format that works for your memory. You know, how many people do you hear say, I've got the worst memory? Guess what? You don't. You just don't know how to access it.
Yeah.
So...
Brett, there's a couple of questions here from John around feature parity between the OneNote versions, and we don't really have an answer, John, to that question about when will the online version of OneNote mirror the desktop version versus iPad versus Mac. Like it is, and Android for that matter. There are
too, because
it is.
There's no Copilot for OneNote on the web on the roadmap. Are there Copilot? I mean, obviously Outlook. There's Copilot in Outlook for the web. What about the other products? Is there Copilot for Word or on the web? No. Is there any talk of that from a broader Copilot perspective? Copilot geniuses in the room?
I haven't.
Haven't heard? Okay. All right. So yeah, no for the no for the online version of OneNote at the moment.
And the other thing is around questions around OneTastic and that add-on and features available in OneNote for that. Again, I know the roadmap. We get to see a bit of the roadmap under the covers. There is some pretty cool stuff coming, but I can't, off the top of my head, I don't think if there's any OneTastic things that are going to be there.
So OneTastic originated from within the OneNote team, didn't it? The guy there was a OneNote developer. He did this on the side. So it's an add-in that you can put into OneNote. Does some...
built in to be able to drag and drop it, like organizing.
Reorganize you. Yeah. Yeah, like things like sorting your page order got added in. So maybe some of it's in there, but I know that there's more that OneTastic does than what OneNote does.
That sort feature is actually something I see get asked all the time. I can't sort my pages in OneNote. Well, actually you can. There's just a little drop down. You can sort them alphabetically by date, etc., etc. So yeah, it's a feature that's crept in that not many people are aware of, that one.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else, Daniel, before we...
No, I think that's all we've got online.
Well, thank you all for having us, and Daniel especially for organising this, and your sponsors and everybody else. We really appreciate the opportunity at any time to come and talk about OneNote, because it's our favourite product. So, yeah.
Amazing effort. Now I'm going to use this.
You can take over here,
and
what am I going to do? I'm going to go back and share your... I'll set my device again and go back to Teams. Where's my call? There it is.
And I'm going to use that little tip that you're showing me, Matt. I've got that sitting on my other desktop, and I've just flicked across, and now I've got it. So before everybody jumps off, the next session is going to be all around Copilot Studio. So being able to create your own custom Copilots with Copilot Studio, and that is going to be a pretty interesting session. Hands-on, we'll build a custom Copilot in the session as well. It will be here in person again at the Reactor, and also online. So that will be there. Registration will open up very, very soon. But Matt and Brett, thank you very much. That was a very good session. So not just Copilot, but some other stuff as well, which is very beneficial for everybody else as well. So thank you very much for taking the time and jumping in. For everybody here, there is... Hang on. They don't take much. For everybody here, there is some pizza here. There are some drinks here. People online, you can just smell it through the microphones. But that'll be us for a little bit. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining online. And once again, round of applause, thumbs up, applause, everything online. Give us some reactions for Matt and Brett. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.